Every Sunday morning, Janine Bryant of Changing Spaces, SRS, and I help you find that perfect place, that sweet spot between too much and too little. It's easy rightsizing here on KFOR FM 103.3, 1240 AM. Janine, good morning.
Good morning. Hello.
Good morning. There is a sweet spot, right?
There
I'm not
is.
Exaggerating.
We can find it. Absolutely. It's just like Goldilocks. Not too big, not too small. It's just right.
One person's keepsake. This is my mantra now. One person's keepsake is another person's clutter. I'm going through that with my son. Good
That's
listeners
true.
have heard me talk about this. It's time to give him some of the things that I've collected of his over the years. I'm really not getting the love back.
He's not too appreciative of it? No?
No, not at this particular time. But again, we go back to that starting point. One person's keepsake is another person's clutter.
Yeah, we hear that so many times from our clients. My kids don't want my stuff. Right? I mean, dear listeners out there, raise your hand if that is you. I bet that is most people that are listening to this right now. My kids just don't want my stuff. And my message to our clients who are experiencing that is that your kids probably do want some things. They just might not be the things that you want them to want. And I also reassure folks that stuff and memories and love are not the same thing. So just because your kids might reject your stuff, it doesn't mean they're rejecting you. It doesn't mean they're not going to remember you once you're gone. And it doesn't mean that they don't love you. Stuff and memories and love are different. Stuff is just stuff.
There needs to be a story behind it.
Yes. If you have items in your home that you want your kids and grandkids to treasure and keep, then there has to be something that is motivating those kids and grandkids to keep those things. And usually what that is there's a story that's attached to that keepsake. The only reason we keep a keepsake is for the sake of keeping it, right? That's how it got its name. So we keep these things because they make us feel good. They remind us of a time. They remind us of a person. And so if you have a keepsake that reminds you of one of your memories, maybe of someone who has passed away, or a time that you lived through that is now gone and it's now over. If you want to pass that keepsake on to your kid, you have to share the story and share the meaning behind that item if they're going to think that item is valuable. Right? So one example I always give is, an old military trunk. Those military trunks, a lot of people have them sitting down in their basement. They came from someone, maybe a parent or a grandparent or a great-grandparent who served in some war. But until you really know the story behind that military trunk, a trunk is just a trunk. And what are you going to do with it, right? We don't use trunks anymore in traveling, so it doesn't have a practical use. But if you grew up hearing the story of your grandfather fighting in World War II at the Battle of the Bulge, now suddenly that military trunk means something. So it's the stories that give something meaning. The object itself doesn't have inherent meaning. So that's something to remember as you are going through your items, and maybe you're identifying objects that you are ready to pass on. And I do think it's best to pass keepsake items on before you die, because the reason you can do that, the reason that's a good thing is because if you pass them on before you die, then you are around to tell the story and to pass on the significance of that object.
I like hearing you say that because I wondered. Because of the lack of love coming back from my son. He's not a collector, and I wondered about that. So
Sure.
I need to relay some stories.
Absolutely.
to him,
Absolutely. If these objects that belong to your son give you a warm and fuzzy feeling, you can't just give him the objects themselves. You have to tell him the story of why it gives you that warm and fuzzy feeling. Oh, I remember, when you were a kid, we built this model airplane together, and, your mom was so mad that, it was a big mess on the dining room table, and whatever the story is, relay that story to him. And then he's going to remember. The act of you telling him that story creates a memory for him. So then when he sees that object, he's going to remember that conversation that you guys had in that time you had together. So that's going to make it meaningful.
Talk about being an outsider looking in and what advantage that gives you when you work with your clients.
Absolutely. So we are a neutral third party, which definitely has its advantages. We interact with all kinds of different families, and we see all kinds of family dynamics throughout this process. So sometimes it really is valuable to have a neutral third party who can kind of be a referee, right? And can kind of ask some objective questions of you from the outside looking in and get you to really think through why this item is important to you, what your son or daughter might be thinking when they say, Mom, I don't want this stuff. I had a client last week who said to me that her daughter didn't want her stuff. They're moving out of a home. The daughter is buying the home from them. And the mother, of course, was trying to get her daughter to keep a lot of their extra stuff because they're having to downsize. And since the daughter's moving into the home, she thought, well, this is easy. Honey, why don't you take some of this stuff? And here's what the daughter said to her. She said, Mom, just because you're downsizing doesn't mean that I'm upsizing. Ooh, right?
The light bulb went off on that one.
Yeah, so I wrote that down when she told me that. I thought, absolutely. So just because you want to let go of some things doesn't automatically mean that someone in your family is going to want to keep them.
You offer perspective, too, for those things that the kids don't want.
We do, absolutely. And we remind our clients, like I said, that objects and memories are not necessarily tied to one another. So, and we can also add a little humor to the situation. We can remind clients that, hey, this is a very normal situation. Most families are going through this. You're not the only one. Just because your daughter doesn't want your things doesn't mean she doesn't love you. And what I remind clients is that your kids can't keep everything that was yours, right? You don't want your kids to live in a museum, do you? You want your kids to keep the items that are going to mean the most to them and help them remember the stories and the relationship that you had with them, that maybe your parents had with your kids. And everyone, I think, gets to decide what those keepsakes are going to be that they want to keep themselves, because we all have our own memories and our own relationships with the people that we have lost. And we get to decide what those items are that are going to remind us best of those memories. No one else gets to tell us what objects spur a memory for us, right? We get to decide that ourselves. So, I always talk about respecting the limits of your space, setting limits, and then respecting those limits. So if you think about keepsakes that you are going to get from a parent or a grandparent, set a limit on those things. Are we talking about 2 boxes of things, or are we talking about 20 boxes, right? Let's be reasonable here. 20 boxes is a little too much. Or sometimes I meet with clients all the time who can't walk through their basement because their basement is filled with keepsakes that maybe after their parents passed away, they had to empty out the house, and so they boxed everything up and it came down to their basement, and now it's been sitting there for 10 years. So let's set a limit and keep only what is reasonable. Another tip that I have is when it comes to keepsakes is to keep the things that you can actually use or display. A keepsake is no good if it's stored away in a box in the basement or the attic. I had someone tell me once, it's hard to remember when something's packed away in a box. And isn't that the truth? I said before, the reason we keep our keepsakes is to remind us of things. Something that's packed away in a box isn't going to remind us of anything. It's going to feel like a heavy weight on our shoulders. So let's keep things that we can use or we can display. One example that I have in my home is a spinning wheel that belonged to my great-grandmother. Okay, this is the woman who came over from Norway. She's a bit of a legend in our family. She changed our family tree. I never met her. She died many years before I was born. But we have the spinning wheel that she used, and I even have a picture of her sitting next to the spinning wheel with a big sack of wool next to it that she was going to spin. Now, Dale, I'm not going to use that spinning wheel, right, to spin wool into yarn. That's not part of my everyday life. But I kept it because I thought it's beautiful enough and it's interesting enough that I am willing to keep it in my home as on display, as a piece of decor. So it's sitting in our basement living room as a decoration and a conversation piece. Now, another example of something that I inherited from my family that I did not keep was a huge accordion that belonged to a great uncle, also who died many years before I was born, so I never met him. Now, what am I going to do with the huge accordion? Okay, I'm not musical. I'm not the kind of person who's going to play that huge accordion. And I also didn't think it was beautiful enough to put it, display it as a piece of decor in my home. So that is something that I got rid of because I wasn't going to use it, I wasn't going to display it, and it wasn't going to remind me of anyone if it's sitting in a storage room in my basement.
Your team is also good at helping clients take that next step. If the kids don't want it, if I don't want it, it has to go somewhere. You
That's
either
right.
give it away or you sell it.
That's right. Those are the two options, really. People always say, what am I going to do with my stuff? Well, you're either going to sell it or you're going to donate it. Or if we can't sell it and we can't donate it, then we try to recycle it or it goes to the trash. It's one of those 4 items. So when we're sorting with clients, we always begin with trying to help them figure out, what are you keeping? Now, the second step is, what are you giving to family and friends? And then for the third step is, then we try to sell what we can. Yep, and there's lots of different ways you can sell things. At our company, Changing Spaces SRS, we organize and run estate sales, and so that's how we help our clients sell things. You can also have an auction, you can have a garage sale, you can sell things on Facebook, you can try to sell things on eBay if you're computer savvy. But then after that, step is done, after you've spent enough time trying to sell the items, then it's time to donate what you can.
You can go to a couple of different places. ChangingSpacesSRS.com is a place to go if you'd like to mine deeper into the business side of Changing Spaces.
Yep.
For tips, for guidelines, for some education, it's EasyRightsizing.com.
That's right. Yes. We've got 2 resources for listeners. If you are moving or you want an estate sale, we'd love to chat with you at ChangingSpacesSRS.com. And if you want to get going yourself and you want to be inspired and educated and informed about how I can go about this process of right sizing, then head on over to EasyRightsizing.com. That's the website that I created that is a companion to the book that I wrote this year called Ready to Right Size.
And how can someone get the book?
That is available on Amazon.com. You just search for Ready to Right Size. You can also find it on EasyRightsizing.com or ChangingSpacesSRS.com, or you can even give us a call at the office and we would be happy to get you a copy. They're $12.95. Our phone number at Changing Spaces is 402-483-0555.
Every Sunday morning we help. It's Easy Right Sizing on KFOR.